Good afternoon, everybody here in Israel and in Europe. Good morning to our guests from across the Atlantic, and good night or good evening to our guests from Asia and Australia. I'm very happy to open our Tel Aviv Institute of Contemporary Psychoanalysis annual conference on human goodness with our keynote speaker, Professor Salman Akhtar. This conference was meant to be the celebration of 20 years to the founding of our institute on October 1999. But due to the COVID pandemic and some other complication, it was postponed to today. And so we have to do it via Zoom. The disadvantage is, of course, the fact that we cannot meet face to face, especially with you, our keynote speaker, Salman. But at least we have the advantage that many professionals from 15 other countries across the world can join us. Before we start, I want to give 3 technological issues we recommend. First, we recommend that you do not leave the Zoom screen during breaks. In this way, you will be connected with no problem until the end of the conference. Second, during lectures, you can send questions on chat, and we'll have it, and Professor Salman Akhtar will be able to respond later. And third, we have the option of simultaneous interpretation for the Hebrew speakers who have difficulties in understanding English. In the bottom of your screen, there is an icon which is called interpretation. For those who would like to hear the Hebrew interpretation, they can press it and sign the Hebrew version. But don't forget, when the lecture ends, press the button again and press off. Otherwise, you will not hear the other speakers. I want to thank the members of the organizing committee and our secretary, Bezalel, who contributed significantly to bring about this conference. But before we start, I invite the chair of our institute, Mrs. Ruth Lavie, to open the conference. Please, Ruth.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Can you? Okay. I'm honored and excited to welcome you, Professor Salman Akhtar, and to thank you for accepting our invitation to attend the conference. We know that a lot of pressure has been exercised in attempt to cancel your participation, but you are with us today, and we truly appreciate your courage. Thank you also for your willingness to hold the conference despite the limitation that force us to meet remotely. In fact, as Gila said, this conference has scheduled to take place last year, but then COVID-19 showed up and unsettled all our plans. The conference was postponed for a year, and who could believe then that after an entire year we would still not be able to meet in person? So it is really pity we cannot meet you face to face. But nevertheless, we are also glad that through internet technology, we would still enjoy few of the ideas on which you write so well in your wide-ranging work, addressing not only psychoanalyst and psychoanalytic issues, but also touching on ordinary daily issues. Your prolific writings is essentially interdisciplinary and is therefore so fitting our institute that put on his banner an interdisciplinary and social engagement mission. Your writing bridges across languages, put together different words, and is seeking to eliminate hierarchies, not only across disciplines, but also between minority and majority, between males and females, between different sexual orientations, etc. Your work is so outpouring. It is reminiscent of an artist that is called for by every object or topic to write, compose, or paint. I had the opportunity to read an article of yours named Dancing with Words, in which you tell about your love of writing. A colleague sent me a passage written by Fernando Pessoa, who said that evil lies in static and non-dynamic nature of the individual. There is no doubt that dancing with words is an existence full of dynamism that set something in motion with me. I knew at that moment that I got a gift from you, a spark of something I can't yet call by name, but I know it will intimately accompany me. So here we witness the kind of writing that is touching, encounters the word and does good. And I believe that all the people who joined in this conference today, many of them from abroad, did it to be enriched by this good. And now, with your permission, I would like to give thanks to the conference organizers. And in the spirit of the day, perhaps it is better to say to all good doers. First, to Dr. Gila Ofer and her great investment and caring. And of course, to all the conference committee, מיכל זלינגר, ליאת ורהפטיק, דוקטור מעיין מזור, אורנה שרצקי. Thanks also to the speakers and the chairpersons. Special thanks to Hadar Kompinski, a representative of the scientific committee headed by Orna Kislasi, and of course Bezalel. Without him, nothing can happen. I wish you all an interesting and fulfilling conference. Thank you for coming. Gila.
Yeah. Well, I think that we are ahead of time, and let us wait a few minutes until 3:30 here and 8:30 in the United States, so that the participants who couldn't join us until now will be here with us. And maybe in the meantime, I will remind you again the technology issues, which is first, leave the screen open even when you go on breaks. It's very important. So in this way, you will be connected easily before, after, in between the breaks. Second, if you have questions during the lectures, you can write them on chat, and also after the Professor Akhtar will finish his lecture, you can talk with him directly. And third, regarding the interpretation, those who would prefer to hear the interpretation can press the icon interpretation on the bottom of the screen, and there you can have Hebrew version, press it, but don't forget after the lecture to press again the off so that you will be able to hear the other speakers as well. Is there any questions regarding technological problems or issues?
Gila, just one point. We're a psychoanalytic institute, but it's not interpretation, it's translation that you mean.
Translation, right. Thank you. The icon is called interpretation, and this was misleading.
both are right. All right.
Every translation is an interpretation, so it's okay.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I will start with a short introduction. And I have here a mail, a message. Ask me to explain in Hebrew also the direction for the translation for those who have difficulties in English. So excuse me, all the English speakers. למי שרוצה תרגום בעברית להרצאות באנגלית, יש אייקון של translation, כתוב שם interpretation, למטה במסך. אתם יכולים ללחוץ על זה, ואז קופצים שלושה דברים, off, English and Hebrew. אז מי שרוצה לשמוע את ההיברו, הוא יראה את אקטאר מדבר, הוא יראה אותו אבל לא ישמע אותו, ישמע את התרגום, יש לנו מתרגמת מצוינת, שאפשר יהיה לשמוע אותה, מי שמעדיף כך. אבל אל תשכחו, בתום ההרצאה, ללחוץ עוד פעם על אוף, לסגור את הטרנסליישן הזה ולהקשיב לכל הדוברים. אוקיי. So we can start now, and I will give a few comments and introduce our main keynote speaker. The title of our conference brings to my mind the age-old question, are we as human beings inherently good, or are we inherently bad? Can we say, לב האדם טוב מנעוריו, meaning man is born with a good heart? Or can we say, homo homini lupus, as was said from time ago? Many have addressed this question and its implications. One approach is homo homini lupus, or in its unabridged form, homo homini lupus est. This is the Latin proverb, meaning a man is a wolf to another man. Man, meaning that man is inherently bad and will behave like a wolf to another human beings. That is, he will behave in a predatory and cruel way. As a counterpoint, Seneca, the younger wrote Homo sacra res homini, which has been translated as man, an object of reverence in the eyes of man. Ovid the poet disagreed with both proverbs and said, man is not a wolf to his fellow man, but a man. Apparently, he is coming with a more balanced view. Thomas Hobbes, at the end of 16th and into the 17th century, the English political philosopher wrote, to speak impartially, both sayings are very true, that man to man is a kind of God, and that man to man is an errant wolf. The first is true if we compare citizens amongst themselves, and the second, if we compare cities. Hobbes was describing the tendency of people to act fairly and generously toward other people in the same society, and the tendency of societies to act deceptively and violently toward other societies. It is interesting to see how Spinoza and Nietzsche addressed this topic. Spinoza said that not every concept of the human nature can be a criterion to the concepts of good and bad, only those that reflect real knowledge of the human mind. In addition, he said that evil is the thing that prevents us from having the good. Accordingly, badness is subjugated to the definition of goodness. The concept of goodness defines itself and at the same time defines what is evil. Nietzsche argued that goodness is not universal, rather it is particular. Goodness cannot be formulated as an absolute, since what is good for one person is not necessarily so for another. In the psychoanalytic theories, we have those which emphasize the homo homini lupus side and those which emphasize the goodness in man's side. Freud agreed with the proverb homo homini lupus est, writing in his Civilization and its Discontents, and I quote, "Men are not gently creatures who want to be loved, who at the most can defend themselves if they are attacked. They are, on the contrary, creatures among those instinctual endowments is it to be reckoned a powerful share of aggressiveness. As a result, their neighbors is for them not only a potential helper or sexual object, but also someone who tempts them to satisfy their aggressiveness on him, to exploit his capacity for work without compensation, to use him sexually without his consent, to seize his possessions, to humiliate him, to cause him pain, to torture and kill him. Homo homini lupus." Klein followed him in this direction and pointed out the inborn aggression and its concomitants, envy, greed, and hate. But she also pointed out the importance of gratitude and paved the way to later theories beyond Winnicott, Kohut, others who offered an alternative by emphasizing the goodness in man. We are 4 days before Memorial Day to the horror of the Holocaust, evil in its most horrible expression. We also witness nowadays atrocities in Myanmar, mass murders in Syria, pogroms, killings carried out by Daesh, ISIS everywhere. A week ago, we read during our celebration of the Seder, the song Chad Gadya, where everybody is killing everybody else. This is just to name a few of the evil that is carried out by men against others. So one could say that with all the horror and pain that human beings inflict on others, that it is naive or presumptuous to think about goodness in our world. But because of this, or maybe in spite of this, we thought that it is important and necessary and courageous, moral and ethical to address and examine human goodness, especially at this time and in this connection. And we follow what the Dalai Lama said: the roots of all goodness lie in the soil of appreciation of goodness. Feelings and emotions are abundant in Salman Akhtar's writings. Thus, I can say that he is the most appropriate psychoanalyst to talk about goodness and appreciation of goodness. Professor Salman Akhtar is a supervising and training analyst at the Psychoanalytic Center of Philadelphia and a professor of psychiatry at Jefferson Medical College. He received the Sigourney Award in 2012 for his remarkable contribution to the field of psychoanalysis. And he's the author of a large number of psychoanalytic papers and about 100 books written or edited by him. Some of them are Matters of Life and Death, The Book of Emotions, Psychoanalytic Listening, A Web of Sorrow, A Comprehensive Dictionary of Psychoanalysis, and many, many more. Akhtar is known for his innovative interpretation of Freud's writing.
Start video.
Can you? Okay, thank you. Akhtar is known for his innovative interpretation of Freud's writing and his ability to integrate varied psychoanalytic approaches from different psychoanalytic schools in a rich and deep manner. Akhtar is also a storyteller and a poet, and some of his poem books are The Hidden Knot, After Landing, Freshness of the Child. Dear Salman, we are all looking forward to hear your thoughts on human goodness. What is goodness to you? What is human to you? What is goodness to you? How we apply it in theory and in practice. Thank you.
Please turn on the microphone, Dr. Akhtar.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's afternoon there, so good afternoon. And as Gila said, good morning to some, good afternoon to some, and good evening to some, which is a good reminder that we are all in this game together, you know, and the world is round and we're all members of this world. Also, two other points before I really get into this topic. One is that I think you gave a pretty good introduction and almost a keynote, so I can perhaps stop now. You have covered most of the ground. I was trembling when you were speaking. Oh my God, she took one more of my points. And so we will see. The second thing is, to the audience, I say that you should take what I say about 87% seriously. I think if you took it 100% seriously, you'd be lost. And if you took less than 87, then you'd be lost too. So I think leave some space for skepticism, leave some space for play, leave some space for idiosyncrasy, and leave some space for spontaneity and imagination and invention and innovation as we go along. You know, a poem, for instance, does not belong to the poet who writes. It belongs to the poet only in the course of writing. Once it's written, it doesn't belong to the poet. It belongs to, Gila, can I see you, please?
We have to ask Bezalel to
yes, I need to see at least one human being.
Yeah, Bezalel.
Yes.
Thank you, Bezalel. Okay.
Okay. So a poem, for instance, I believe does not belong to the poet. It belongs only during the process of being written. The moment it's written and it's a finished product, it belongs to the audience. And it belongs to the reader or to the listener to make what they want to make of it, which usually is between what the poet meant and created, known or unknown to it himself or herself, and what the audience found in it. And the meanings lie in that bridge. So that's why I said that listen to me with 87% seriousness. The 13% is for imagination, play, innovation, surprise. I surprised myself while talking. I had no idea I'll be saying this thing about poetry. It just came to me. So that's the spirit in which we should listen. There is an idea which kind of mentioned either by Gila or by the president of the society. And that is that there is psychoanalytic ideas and there are daily ideas. You know, that is itself, I think, a questionable notion. You know, I remember when I published the paper on forgiveness, one of the objections was that forgiveness is not a psychoanalytic subject. I would take a deep breath and at least one drink of scotch to answer this. You know, and to me, every subject is subject for psychoanalysis. You know, psychoanalysis is about human experience. And if there's a human experience, it's subject to psychoanalysis. So with all that said, let us begin with a story. I was coming back from Brazil after a meeting. And I landed around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in Dallas, Texas. I had to change the plane to come to Philadelphia. There was a 2-hour gap or 3-hour gap. Dallas Airport, those of you who have been, is a very, very big airport. You have to walk and walk and walk and walk. So I came out of the plane, I walked a long distance, sat down. By this time, you come out of the plane, you walk, you take your stuff. Bit by bit, it's now beginning to be 7 a.m. So I thought that I will make a couple of phone calls, which were important to me, in the United States. And I went in my pocket to look for my appointment book. I still work with the old-fashioned way with the appointment book. You know, I don't have, I have an iPhone, but my appointments are everything. And I found that I didn't have my appointment book, which was very, very disturbing because all the clinical appointments in it, exceptions to clinical appointments are in it, speaking engagements are in it. So I got very upset. I walked up to the booth and I asked, there was a booth or something, you know, a counter where the same airline was. And I said, you know, I just came from Brazil and I think I left my appointment book in the plane, and can you please call and help? The guy said, what time did the plane land? I said, 5:30. What time is it now? 7. Ah, the plane is gone. It's been cleaned up. It's been moved. I don't think you can find it. A man was standing there from the same company, same airlines. He says, he dialed and he called that terminal. He says, what gate was it? I told him. He says, the plane is still there. He says, come with me. We walked all the way back and the janitors were vacuuming the plane. He called the janitor. Janitor came. He says, go in front of seat number 13B and look in the pocket. There's an appointment book. The janitor goes, comes back and says, there's no appointment book. The guy says, let me go in. The janitor says, no, you're not allowed to go in. He calls some big boss and takes permission and gives the phone to the janitor, and the janitor then lets him in. He goes in, comes back, and he says, here's your appointment book. Why? Why? The question is, why? Second example. I'm in my house, Sunday afternoon, just like for you today. I'm not expecting any visitor. You know, I've become used to not expecting visitors living in this American society. In India, people knock on the door, or sometimes don't even knock, they just show up. My doorbell rings. I'm surprised because I was not expecting anybody. I open the door. I see a very poor African-American woman standing, and I see her car, which is completely old and battered car, in my driveway. And I immediately have a feeling that she's looking for a job. Maybe she wants to be a cleaning woman or something. And I already have a cleaning woman, so I felt bad that I'm not going to be able to help her or give her a job. She says to me, are you Dr. Akhtar? I said, yes. She opens her pocketbook, poor, battered, ribbed pocketbook, and she takes out my checkbook. She says, you were grocery shopping, I think, in such and such a store, and you dropped your checkbook. And I looked at the address, and the address was only 1 or 2 miles. So I thought I'll drive up and give it to you. Why? Why? Would you have done it? Would I have done it? Third, October of 1972. In order to come to the United States, there's an exam called ECFMG, Educational Council for Foreign Medical Graduates. You have to take that exam. India banned that exam because they felt that there was a major brain drain, and therefore there was no possibility of taking that exam in India, which only meant that people who had money could go abroad and take it. So people used to go to Kabul, people used to go to Colombo, People used to go to Kuala Lumpur. People used to go these kind of close by places to take these exams. I had mentioned this in some family gathering that I wanted to go USA. The matter was listened and dropped. One day, I was a psychiatry resident finishing my residency. The phone rings in my office and it's from a travel agency. There's a ticket for you here. I was very puzzled, so I went there and they said there's a ticket for you to fly from New Delhi to Khartoum, Sudan, via Addis Ababa to take the exam. This ticket was sent to me by my uncle, by mother's sister's husband. So he was not even a blood relative. And as if this was not enough, I lost human contact. Gila?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Good. It's okay. So now this uncle is not even blood related. He's my mother's sister's husband. He sends me this ticket. Come, there's exam in Khartoum. You can take this exam. I remember you wanted to go USA. This ECFMG exam you can take in Khartoum. But not only he sends me a ticket without my asking, he also, there's a typed message with the ticket that because you may never come to this part of the world ever again, you'll have to stop overnight in Addis Ababa and then come to Khartoum because there was no direct flight. I have added a little bit extra thing for you, and that is that on the way back, don't go back via this because you would have seen it anyway. Go back by Cairo. And I booked a hotel for you for 2 days. So you can see Egypt also. Why? Why did that man from the airline agency walked 10 terminals and insisted on opening the plane, got permissions and got my diary? Why did this black woman drove 2 miles or 3 miles to come and give me my checkbook? Why did my uncle send me a ticket without my asking, and not only send me a ticket, but arrange that on the way back, I should see something else? Why? Now, as psychoanalysts, we are very wary of and very suspicious about happiness. When a patient is happy, we wonder what is going on really, and when will the sorrow show up? When a patient says good morning, we wondered, why is he warning us, that preparing us for the bad to come? And so on and so forth. We are skeptical, and we have gotten this skepticism from Papa, from our father, or actually, as Stefano Bolognini rightly says, our grandfather, Sigmund Freud. The temptation in these 3 stories is to immediately try to deconstruct them and try to find their meaning, which by implication already means that we are walked away from the meaning that is obvious. The relatively uncelebrated and unsung British analyst John Klauber, for whom I have great respect, he points out that one of the differences in technique and psychoanalysis in various kinds of analysts is how much attention does one pay to the conscious and pre-conscious material, as against how curious and how much in pursuit of the unconscious one is. To begin to think in these 3 stories, what do they mean, is already walking away from the conscious material. Because the conscious material can itself challenge us and stir us up in ways that are uncomfortable. We are used to dealing with the unconscious. We are less used to dealing with the conscious. The temptation to deconstruct has to be not denied, not cancelled, postponed. First, we deal with the conscious material, and then the pre-conscious. Sandler's famous paper, the 3-box model, addresses this matter. I think the reason we get tempted to deconstruct these stories and try to see, whether they had some kind of reaction formation hidden in them, whether they had some kind of undoing hidden in them, whether they had some kind of reparative impulse hidden in them, which was a defense and atonement for inner hostility, etc. I think this kind of thing comes to us from Freud, who had rather dismal view of human beings. Gila has hinted on this, but I will quote 4 sentences of Freud. One place he says, masses are lazy and unintelligent. Okay. Second, people are at their base anti-cultural and anti-social. Third, the idea of human goodness is a wicked delusion. 4, the philanthropists among us have been derived from childhood animal tormentors. Now, this is a rather bleak view of mankind. And we will go back and wonder, why would he have such a bleak view of humankind? I think a later complication was added by Heinz Hartmann, who has literally said, this, please understand, this is a literal sentence. I teach my students and I always tell them, I may tell you some weird stuff and strange stuff, but never a lie. Heinz Hartmann writes in his book, Psychoanalysis and Moral Values, psychoanalysis has nothing to do with morality. In fact, psychoanalysis is a technology. This is a sentence, psychoanalysis is a technology. And yet, when an analyst sees a sadist, when an analyst sees a rapist, when an analyst sees a child abuser, when an analyst sees an animal torturer, when an analyst sees someone who's politically very different from them, for you, a Nazi, when an analyst sees people like sadists, rapists, child abusers, animal torturers, embezzlers, liars, and politically opposed and dangerous people, we call them evil. And we consider evil as the bedrock, like penis envy was for Freud. Meaning, let's not discuss it anymore. Let's not deconstruct it anymore. And in that moment, we become moral. So, on one hand, we say psychoanalysis is outside of morality and has nothing to do with morality. We don't deal with good and bad. But these kinds of people we call evil, which is a moral judgment. On the other hand, psychoanalysis is also full of, at least I counted, because I'm not a plagiarist, but I'm a stamp collector. Not really, meaning that I collect good ideas. So I collected 12 psychoanalytic concepts which have the word good in it. Good Object by Melanie Klein, Good Enough Mother by Donald Winnicott, Poor Little Good Child by Carl Menninger, The So-Called Good Hysteric by Elizabeth Zetzel, Good Psychoanalytic Hour by Ralph Greenson, Good Dream by Masood Khan, Too Good Mother by Robert Shields, Good Enough Hatred by Harvey Rich, Good Enough Revenge by myself, Negative Goodness by Helena Deutsch, Defenses Against Goodness and False Goodness by Roy Schaefer. On one hand, we say somebody is evil. On the other hand, we have 12 concepts involving good. And then we claim psychoanalysis has nothing to do with morality. I don't believe it. And I'm sure that some people are already disagreeing, which makes me very happy. we will then have a good and lively discussion. So then the question is, what are we talking about when we use the word good in describing so many concepts? Are we talking about that they're adaptive and efficient socially? Are we talking about that they are adequately aim inhibited? Are we talking about that they are sublimations? Are we talking about they have an optimal mixture of drive and defense? I think all this is possible. But I urge you, and especially I hope that there are some young people in the audience. By young, I mean below 40, So below 40, up to 40 is a baby in psychoanalysis. 40, 45 is like a child in psychoanalysis. So to young people, I can talk like this: grow up. Grow up. The fact that these behaviors and these things are adaptively efficient, aim inhibited, sublimated, and contain optimal mixture of drive and defense is not a satisfactory and only explanation. There's something higher involved here, something bigger involved here. Now, that said, and I'll come back to why. That said, let us now return to Freud. Freud himself, who had such bad view of mankind, if you look carefully, you find 2 or 3 very interesting things. One, in his paper, Those Wrecked by Success, Freud uses a phrase called 2 great human crimes. And by 2 great human crimes, he means incest and parricide. Now here, we have to excuse Freud for his criticism. Aha, something happened to the screen. I'm seeing the blue sky in Israel.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Right, good. I've got to see the sky. It's good. I was saying something higher up. There's something higher in this. So it appeared. See how it works? So now, the 2 great human crimes that Freud talks about, one is incest and the other is parricide, the murder of the father. Here, of course, Freud's own neurosis and Freud's own cultural bias and Freud's own phallocentrism becomes a shackle in his ankle. So that he says 2 great crimes are incest and parricide. Parricide means murder of the father, which implies that murder of mother is somehow not a great human crime. And murder of brother and sister is okay. And murder of son and daughter is okay. No, it's not okay. This is a boy's and man's view. The correct thing to say would have been the 2 great human crimes are incest and murder. Incest because it destroys families and we are weak animals and we need families. And murder because it takes over a diabolical right over human beings and places oneself in either a divine or diabolical or divinely diabolical or diabolically divine position. And it carries on an amount of omnipotence that a human being is not entitled to. So murder and incest are 2 fundamentally bad things. And I agree with Freud. In fact, every day I come home, pull my car in the driveway, and if I have not committed murder and incest that day, I say, good boy, good boy. So one thing is certainly implied in Freud, that having restraint over murderous and incestuous impulses is a good thing. Restraining one's murderous and incestuous impulses is at least makes you not a bad person. Now that's one movement in Freud. But even more important is that his concept of life instinct is not only about living and staying alive. Far from it. His concept of life instinct implies growth, advancement, thinking, synthesis, abstraction, development of theories and super theories, and his love and admiration of epistemology and curiosity is especially evident. The only place where he says he does not reduce curiosity to sexuality is in his admiration of Leonardo da Vinci, who he feels was a really curious person, not like curious because wanting to see, mommy, daddy have sex or some such thing. No, for da Vinci, he had great admiration. The fact that he had value for, and he says it with true admiration about da Vinci, about curiosity, about knowledge, about the evolution of higher and higher and higher levels of thinking, which is inherent in life instinct. And to a certain extent, I lost you, Gila, again.
I'm here.
Okay, I get afraid that I said something bad and you turn me. Okay, that I think in Freud, the aspect of goodness is described in a negative way by restraining incestuous and murderous impulses, but also implied in a positive way by mental growth. By intellectual curiosity, and by wanting to know about the world and wanting to see the world afresh again and again. Freshness of the child. Even his concept of ego instincts. If you look carefully, the word ego instincts is used by Freud in many different forms. One of them is self-protective instincts. One of them is self-protective instincts. But there's also self-growing instincts, self-promoting instincts, in the sense not of commercial, but in intellectual ways, self-enhancing instincts. Do you see? That this is based inherently inside the human being to grow, to know, to learn, to be more advanced. These two pieces, avoidance of incest and murder, restraint over those impulses, which all of us have, and the second, the respect for knowledge and respect for curiosity, most evident in his admiration of unadulterated admiration of Leonardo da Vinci. Then if we look at Klein is the analyst who most clearly and specifically talks of goodness. But with an interesting twist, in which, following Freud, not on the erotic dimension, because in Freud, murder and incest were both intertwined with the Adipose complex, and therefore fundamentally they were erotic. Murder was in the service of eros. Klein, following Freud's death instinct, does the same thing. Freud says you can be good if you don't commit murder and incest. Klein says you can be good if you know you're bad. You cannot be good unless you recognize that you're bad. Once you recognize you're bad, now you can try to be good. Here is a personal example. I'm an immigrant from India. I live in the United States now about 48, 49 years. I used to feel that I was like the cohort's tragic man. Like I can't speak my mother tongue the whole day. I cannot be talking to you in my mother tongue. And I speak in English. If I go on the street, I can't find my kind of food. No building looks like the way it looked when I was growing up, and so on and so forth. And people mispronounce my name all the time, and so on and so forth. So I used to feel that I'm such a tragic man. despite money and education. What a tragedy that I'm out of my country and out of my home and everything. Till about 15 years ago, when you become 60, you start really thinking, I think, till 60 you're playing. So now what happens is that around 60 years of age, it dawned upon me, it occurred to me, I was the one who left India. Excuse me. Nobody asked me to leave. I was not a refugee. I was not an exile. I was not running away from political, ethnic, religious torture. Actually, my family was quite well off and well known. Well off and well known and well established. I was a doctor. I could have led a reasonable good life. I left India, the motherland that gave birth to me, that raised me, on whose chest I walked, and whose food I ate, and whose education made me a high school student, college student, medical student, psychiatry resident. I left that mother. This realization turned me from a tragic man into a guilty man. And the moment I realized this, I began to offer reparation to India. I became good to my Indianness. I became good to India. I became good to Indian people in this country. This is, although the words I use are cohorts, tragic man and guilty man. He was taking psychoanalysis from guilty man to tragic man. I'm talking about from tragic man to guilty man. And in that way, this is a classical analytic notion. And this notion is from Klein. You cannot be good unless you know that you have done bad. Then you can try to offer reparation, feel remorse. By the way, as a footnote is not related to the topic, even Mrs. Klein wrongly uses the word guilt. The correct word is remorse. Guilt is about intention to break rules. Remorse is about having hurt people. It's such a pity, love, guilt, and reparation. No, love, remorse, and reparation. That's the correct.
She's Hungarian.
What's that?
Salman. She's Hungarian, so she doesn't, her English is also imperfect.
Okay, good of you to defend her. Thank you. So she doesn't need a defense. She's a tough woman.
Sure.
Do you know there's a book out about, she has had the most portraits painted. There's no other psychoanalyst who has had most portraits of photographs and painting and most sculptures, more than Freud. And she broke one statue by herself and she burned one painting by herself. She was a tough cookie. There's a wonderful book out on this topic about Klein's photographers and Klein's statue makers and such, written by a hematologist whose wife is a Kleinian analyst. So he was dragged to all kinds of meetings, poor guy. So now in his old age, he decided to write a book about this. Beautiful book. I think it's called The Life of a Portrait. The Life of a Portrait. Okay, so Mrs. Klein proposes that one has to own the aggression, moving away from the paranoid position. In the paranoid position, we are run by fear, greed, envy, and certainty. In depressive position, we are led by contentment, humility, sadness, remorse, and reparation, and gratitude. This gratitude that the world has given me something. This gratitude, what have I done? You tell me, or what have you done, Gila, to deserve listening to Mozart? Have you done anything to deserve it? Or to see paintings by Van Gogh? Or to stand in front of Taj Mahal? Or, do you see, we haven't done any such thing. It's just given to us. Or to see the color red or green. We haven't done any such thing. These things are given to us. And that we should be grateful about while we complain about the world. That is our aggression, my aggression towards India. Only when we recognize our aggression, then we can recognize that the badness is not only outside, badness is inside also. And goodness is not only inside, goodness is outside also. Now we can become remorseful. And now we can become full of gratitude and offer reparation and try to become good. So in Klein, the issue of goodness revolves around recognition of badness and therefore humility and gratitude and reparation. Then Donald Winnicott, who takes the issue of goodness for granted. He doesn't discuss goodness, but goodness pervades his work. And any deviation from it, inauthenticity, inability to be spontaneous, inability to play, is considered pathology. And a child's original nature is considered to be good. Now here, there is a very important theoretical issue. Unlike any other, zero, unlike any other theorist in psychoanalysis, whether it be Freud, Klein, Edith Jacobson, Margaret Mahler, Fairbairn, Kernberg, unlike any other theorist. All these theorists I named, Freud, Mahler, Klein, Fairbairn, Kernberg, Edith Jacobson, all of them, they believe and they tell us that the basic Heinz Lichtenstein, not very read, but very good writer, that the basic core of the self, the real inside basic fundamental core, is already a mixture of the baby's nature and mother's evocations. That creates the core self. The mother is in the baby. And that she looks at the baby, she evokes something, and that becomes the person. So it's like a piano that is delivered in somebody's house, and somebody comes and plays piano, a tune comes out. That tune is Gila. That tune is Salman. It is not the body and neuroanatomy, and it is not the social interaction. It's an amazing product of both. That is our basic assumption in entire psychoanalytic theory, except one, Donald Winnicott, where the implication is that if the mother gets in the child, it leads to falsehood. This much falsehood or this much falsehood. And he doesn't say all falsehoods is bad. Some falsehoods is good. We wear clothes, we say good morning, we eat with fork and knife. These are all falsehoods. Some falsehood is okay, but it's a falsehood nonetheless. So what would be true self, which is the core self? True self is incognito. In the Buddhist metaphor, true self means one thought, one action. If I eat an apple and I'm thinking my mother will be happy I'm eating an apple, my wife will be happy that I'm not eating red meat, or, oh, this is a forbidden apple, and blah, 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 then it's false self. But if I pick up an apple and eat an apple and I'm not thinking anything, I'm just eating an apple, that's called true self. True self is in the essence of living and hence undescribable, incognito. And that is the good self. The rest is all false in compliance to the external world. Some compliance and some falsehood may be good, but it's nonetheless false, it's not real. Winnicott is the only theorist who proposes that the real self and the core self does not come from outside, is inherent in the self. It's like a seed of a rose. You put the rose, you protect it from too much heat, too much water, you give it a little water, you put a little fertilizer, but you have no control over the color of the rose. And when will the rose blossom? And how many petals will it have? No, 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 no. Unlike Jacobson, Kernberg, Mahler, Fairbairn, Klein, Freud. Freud clearly says the ego is the precipitate of abandoned object cathexis. Anne-Marie Weil has a paper called 1981 Psychoanalytic Study of the Child called The Basic Core, which summarizes these matters. Heinz Lichtenstein has a paper on this. Every theorist suggests that the essential self is made of the mother and the baby, except Winnicott. This is a very unique idea. And therefore, it has implications towards what we can do. Think of Gauguin. He was a rich man in Vienna, had 13 children, and a lot of money. He was a big privy councillor for a bank. And what did he do? Left his wife, left his children, gave them all the money, moved briefly to Hawaii, and then to Tahiti, and died of syphilis. How good a life that is. How good a life. Painting and died of syphilis. Isn't that good life? I think that's a good life. So that is authenticity. We'll get into that when we get into technique. Then there are two other theorists whose work touches on goodness. One is Erickson, who is not so much appreciated. He was a very good writer and very good thinker. Erickson's work, especially when he was very old, and partly elaborated by his wife after his death, has two concepts which are of great value here. Three concepts. One which was inherent in his early part of work, two that appeared later. One is called generativity. The other is called belief in a species. Belief -in -species. And the third is called care. Generativity was already inherent in his 8 stages and so on and so forth. Belief in a species and care are two concepts that he introduced when he was very old and have been then elaborated by his wife after his death. By generativity, Erickson meant that around age, the age can vary because, lifespan varies from country to country, region to region, era to era, century to century. So we can't put a finger on the number of the age. But there comes a certain time when one begins to enjoy giving. I give so many things. I used to take from others and take for myself. Now I give. One begins to enjoy giving, and especially giving to younger people. Here in my drawer, there's a little box. And in that box, there is something. This box I have kept for one of my supervisees, whom I think you have met, Ariella Green. Yeah? I have kept it for her baby. She has a baby, few months old. This box has a certain thing that was given to me. That was, I hope she's not hearing this. If she's not hearing, I would tell. I don't know. Ariella, type it if you're there. I'll wait for 1 minute, and then if she's not hearing, I'll tell you what it is. And I treasured this thing. But now I'll give it to her. I'm keeping it to give it to her. Okay, otherwise she would have written. What is in it? It is a very interesting thing. It is a little spoon. It's a little spoon. And to feed the baby with solid food, on the tip of it, there is the picture of a Hindu god. Now, I'm not Hindu, please understand, but I'm Indian. And when you grow up in India, some things go in your breath. Cricket, English language, Bollywood, Hinduism, tuberculosis, all these things go in you, you know. So there's the Hindu god. But where was this spoon? This spoon was always sitting on the little table between the couch and the chair of Margaret Mahler. She had found this spoon in Europe someplace, and she carried it always with her. And I got it from, she gave it to one of her supervisees, Selma Kramer, who gave it to me when she was old. And now I'll give it to Ariel Agree. So now
Which
this planning isn't the
Which
person
god is on the spoon?
What's that?
Which Hindu god is on the spoon?
That's a very interesting question. Vishnu, you know, the keeper of the life. So now, see, I wasn't planning to do all this. You know, this just happened. That's why I was saying 87% seriousness, 13% fun, spontaneity, and imagination. So now, within Erickson, this idea of generativity, giving and encouraging to younger generation. This notion has been taken by a Finnish psychoanalyst who passed away, Veikko Taka, who's the only analyst for, till recently, there's some new papers on it, on the affect of tenderness. Tenderness. Veikko Taka suggests that tenderness is that amount of sweet pain, sweet, very sweet little pain that one experiences in letting the younger generation or even facilitating the younger generation pursue its dreams, even though that dream may not be one's own. Even though that dream may not be one's own. And even though that dream may be different from one's dream for them. Tenderness. Generativity is not only giving things. Generativity is giving of attention, giving of love, giving of help, giving of facilitation of growth. And tenderness is a part of it. And then two other concepts of Erickson. One is belief in a species. That is, sooner or later, a human being has to come to realize that all human beings are human beings. Now, this statement sounds kind of silly and sounds self-evident. But you know, when it comes to ethnic hatred, when it comes to religious discrimination, when it comes to political divides, very often people call others as vermin, rats, dogs, animals, and so on and so forth. The fact is, all people are human beings. All people. If you see a little dog called Chihuahua, a little dog called Yorkshire Terrier, a medium-sized dog called Beagle, a bigger dog called German Shepherd or a Golden Retriever, and a huge big dog called Great Dane. All of them are dogs. All human beings are human beings. Whether they are Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Hindu, whether they're Israelis, Chinese, Japanese, Palestinians, Indians, or Americans or Canadians, they're all human beings. This is called belief in a species, to come to understand that we are dealing with human beings and no one else. And the reverse term that Erickson coined about this was pseudo-speciation. That is, to create two species out of one species in order for political and religious and ethnic hatred. The third concept of Erickson that is pertinent to our topic is care. Care does not mean owning. Care does not mean possessing. Care does not mean acquisition. Care means taking care of, feeling careful, caring for people and things, and rivers and mountains, and trees and dogs and cats, and poems and prose. Care. This capacity, Erickson says, arises in late middle age. When we begin to care, take care of, be careful, and care for. And here Erickson was far ahead. And that is that because he gave the external reality, times of the year, the landscape, the history of a country, the geography of a country, an independent existence and effect on the mind. Harold Searles, of course, has also written about it. Finally, the fifth theorist I read in this connection is Bion. In Bion, there are two concepts that touch upon the idea of goodness. One is the concept of O. Gila, can I see you again? I don't know where
Yes,
she went.
I'm here. Yeah.
That the concept of O. Now, fascinatingly, while Neville Symington, the British analyst, somewhat religious, I think, Christian British analyst, settled in Australia later on, he traced why Bion used the word O to some Greek stuff. I and Rafael Lopez Corvo, the independent biographer of Bion, completely independent from me, and I completely independent from him. We trace it to Bion's childhood in India, to the sound, the Hindu chanting sound, Om. Now, the M is cut off, so it's only O. Because the moment you say M, you close your mouth, no nipple anymore, no nipple anymore, no mommy anymore, and things come to an end. But if you keep saying O, it's continuous, and this figure of O is round without disruption and is like a breast. It is Hinduism in Bion. What does O mean? O means the omnipresent, utter, and absolute truth of the moment, which is existing every second, but which cannot be found by thinking. Because thinking is a human activity, and human beings are not smarter than the truth. The truth will show it to them. Here is an example. On April 15th, 1995, I'm driving to work. No cell phone, nobody else in the car, radio is off. I'm driving. Suddenly, a truth appears in front of me. Of the 4 famous cases of Sigmund Freud, Dora, Wolfman, Ratman, Little Hans. 75% of the famous cases of Freud had to do with human fantasies involving animals. I was already a graduate from the Institute. I graduated in 86, this was 1995. Nobody has ever said this sentence to me. Nobody has ever pointed that out and written this. 75% of Freud's famous cases are about human involvement with animals. It blew my mind. So I immediately said, I'll write a book about it. Within 5 days, I realized, no, it is too difficult. It is too big a topic. But when I can write a book, I edit it. So I edited a book about animals, which became so big that it had to be cut in two. So we have two books. One is called Mental Zoo. One is called Cultural Zoo. All psychoanalytic about animals. Rats, cats, dogs, snakes, birds, animals in children's literature, animals in movie, man-animal transformation, and so on and so forth. You know, by the way, the Japanese analyst Osamu Kitayama has pointed out a very interesting thing. In Western mind, the stories are that an animal turns into a human being. In Eastern mind, a human being turns into an animal. It's a very interesting, and he goes into why. There's a little book called The Prohibition of Don't Look. That discussion is in there. Now, Bion, who was born and raised in India till age 8, and then abruptly sent away to a British boarding school, was carried in lab by a Hindu nanny, like Freud, with a Catholic nursemaid, who now we know may have breastfed him also. Did you know this, Gila?
Yeah.
That Catholic nursemaid breastfed him also. You know, where it is written? In the book by Prophecy Codes. There are some letters. This is very interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And how that milk affected him. You know,
Yeah.
basically a Catholic trapped in the body of a Jew. That was Freud. And here we have a Hindu trapped in the body of Protestant Christian. Beyond. That's why we have got all messed up with religion. The only person who was comfortable was Winnicott. Nice Christian boy in white country, which ruled the whole world. No problem. People are good, he said. People are good. So beyond, one is the truth. Truth exists. We cannot find it by effort. In fact, we just have to be a servant to the universe, an empty-handed servant. And then the truth will appear. Take another example. Adipose Complex. When did Adipose Complex came into being? With Freud? With Sophocles? Or was there Adipose Complex before Sophocles, before he wrote the play? E is equal to mc square, says Einstein. Was E not is equal to mc square before Einstein found it? It was always there. This leads to an amazing idea which shakes us up. And that is, there's no such thing as invention. There's no such thing as invention. There's only such a thing as discovery. The universe already has all these secrets and secret combinations. The keys are always there. We just have to find the locks. The keys are there. We have to find the locks. And the second idea in Beyond is the act of faith. And the act of faith has to do with leaving knowledge and experience behind. Now, of course, to leave knowledge and experience behind, you have to have knowledge and experience. But in certain moments, one leaves knowledge and experience behind, and one is guided by faith. Now, if we put all these people together and we say, okay, let's develop a profile of a good human being. We find that human being restrained, a little bit restrained. We find that human being knowledge seeking. These two things we find from Freud. We find that human being full of humility and gratitude and generosity and reparativeness. This we get from Klein. We find that a human being authentic and confident about his playfulness. That we get from Winnicott. We find that human being believing in the commonality of all human beings and caring about himself, caring about others, caring about things, caring about nature and animals. From Erickson, we find that human being full of faith and believing that truth exists. This is a good human being. Now, 5 questions arise. Question number 1, why did you pick these authors? Why not other authors? My answer is, sure, please go ahead. I mean, I'm a little human being, you know, I can only do this much. I'm sure there are other authors can be quoted. Kohlberg, Lowald, bunch of others can be quoted. No problem. I have no problem. I only read these 5 in this connection. 1. Second, some of these things you are saying are contradictory. Restraint and playfulness, how can that be? Yeah, good point, good point. But you know, restraint outside, playfulness inside. You want to enter your house backward while eating yogurt with your finger. Please do it. Please do it. You want to dance in your house, sing loudly? Please do it. Don't do it on the street. You'll be in trouble. Restraint and playfulness are not contradictory. Where, when, how much? Second. Third is, why do you call these things good? Why don't you call them mature and healthy? There's something bigger in them. You know, oral gratification and overcoming the struggles of anal phase and resolving separation individuation and mastering the anxieties and sadnesses of Adipose complex. Care, faith, truth, generativity, admiration of epistemology and gratitude are not at that level. They are at yet another level of abstraction. 4, are these acquired traits or are they hardwired traits? Are these things as a result of upbringing or are these present in the human being as an animal? The answer is both. Beth Selig and Lisa Rosoff have a paper on altruism in which they talk about proto-altruism. And the person to read most importantly about the animal altruism and the animal generosity is Hardy, H-R-D-Y, who is an ethnologist, ethologist, and neonatologist who takes animal behavior and shows it close to children's behavior. And how altruism is inherent in animal nature. This is only Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All the Middle Eastern religions, all 3, that cut up this universe into God is the best, prophet is the second best, mankind is the third best, and animals are below us. No, 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 no. In fact, sometimes animals are better than us. I would rather be my own dog, you know, I would be free of these burdens of writing papers and books, but I'll just be a dog then. I'll not be like cut up and split up in various parts. Hindus don't give a damn. God, man, prophet, animal. One God can be dog, dog can be man, man can be prophet, prophet can be animal. Who cares? That's poetry. These Middle Eastern religions are prose and serious prose with rules, regulations, grammar, punctuation. So, are they acquired traits or are they hardwired traits? The answer is both. Human being has both potential, like a piano. A good piano can be played by a bad pianist and bad music comes out. A bad piano can be played by a good pianist and a reasonably good music comes up. It's both. Finally, the fifth question and objection to this kind of thinking is the goodness before badness? Or is the goodness after badness? And herein lies the fundamental split in psychoanalysis, which originally began with the difference in the temperament of Freud and Ferenczi. A Hungarian, talkative, outgoing, loving healer, and a Germanic, quiet, stoic thinker. It began with Freud and Ferenczi. Then it became Klein and Balint. Then it became Kohut and Kernberg. It keeps taking the same reincarnations again and again. And politically dangerous and unpopular it may be to say, there is also yet another dimension hidden, and that is of a Christian psychoanalysis and a Jewish psychoanalysis. A psychoanalysis conceived by an ethnic, despised, prejudiced, and discriminated ethnic minority, and a privileged and comfortable and affluent and dominant majority. The nature of the mankind inherent in the two models. If you notice, almost all the British middle school analysts, Winnicottians, almost all are Christians. While Anna-Freudians and Kleinians, which is only methodologically different, but not conceptually different. One interested in skepticism about Eros. One is involved in a skepticism about Thanatos. But a skepticism. As against Winnicott, Fairbairn, Guntrip, Balint, who was at age 19, he was Jewish. His name was Mihaly Bergsman. He became Michael Balint and became a Unitarian churchgoer. And Heinz Kohut became converted to Catholicism. This middle school carries a Christian mentality, a majority mentality, an ethnic majority, a dominant mentality of people who have not been hurt, who have not been mistreated, who have ruled the world, as against the psychoanalysis of a minority, a displaced, discriminated against, hated, and murdered minority. They say human beings are not good. They say human beings, we own India. We own India. We own Africa. How else? How good it is. We own Australia. We own Canada. We own everything. It's good, isn't it? It's very good to own the whole world and to live with the same skin color people, with the same religious people. How nice it can be. That is what also underlies what began as a Hungarian-German difference, about which Andre Heinal has written, also was fueled by ethnic minority psychoanalysis and ethnic majority psychoanalysis. So, is the goodness before badness or is the goodness after badness? Is the majority correct or is the minority correct? The answer is both. Belief in the species. Majorities are human beings, minorities are human beings. Minority mentality is correct, majority mentality is correct. And therefore, one should not succumb to this split of skepticism and credulousness, of interpretation and affirmation, of a paternal psychoanalysis and a maternal psychoanalysis, of a German psychoanalysis and a Hungarian psychoanalysis, of a Christian psychoanalysis and a Jewish psychoanalysis. Somebody, one time I was saying this, somebody says, will there be also an Islamic and Hindu psychoanalysis? And my answer is, of course. Of course there will be. There's already begun. Sudhir Kakkar's work has so much Hinduism in it. and different views of things. And there's a book currently out called Islamic Psychoanalysis. Things will happen. We are growing. A tree grows and gets more branches, but they are all related to this stem. Here, I will finish by saying something that I hinted at earlier on with Dr. Stefano Bolognini, for whom I have great admiration, says. He says, we call Sigmund Freud the father of psychoanalysis. He says, this is no longer true. Because to keep calling him father of psychoanalysis implies that the middle generations have done nothing. Time has come that we should call Dr. Sigmund Freud as the grandfather of psychoanalysis. I think Dr. Bolognini is a good analyst, and this is a good idea. Thank you very much.